Let's take you here now. The Human Sciences Research Council has given a thumbs up to the Independent Electoral Commission on the job well done during the 2021 local government elections. The HSRC has been conducting research with voters in the past few days on their experience before, during and after the local government elections. Today, the council briefed the media on its findings on the research. It says despite some reports of intimidation, voting stations opening late and other problems, the voters are largely happy. The HSRC says most voters have also expressed satisfaction with how the IEC performed. Well, joining me right here in the studio is Professor Narnia Bohler-Muller. She's the Divisional Executive of the Developmental, Capable and Ethical State Research Division at the Human Sciences Research Council. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining me this afternoon. So, you've done this analysis, and it seems like most South Africans who went to the polls were generally satisfied. Talk to me about what your findings entail.
Well, that's exactly the point, and probably the most important one we need to state is that it is about the voter's voice. So it's people who went to the polls who actually experienced the voting process and overwhelmingly were in favor of the operational issues. In other words, they were happy with access to the voting stations, happy with the fact that they didn't stand in queues for too long, happy with the professionalism of the staff. I acknowledge that there have been a number of complaints, but we're talking about the majority here. And so this is something that I'm sure the IEC is relieved about. And 95% of South Africans who voted believe that the elections were free and fair. And at least I can sit here and give you that good news.
How do you determine that? What does it mean to the voter when they say that the election or the process was free and fair?
That's a good question. I mean, what we do is we randomly select 300 voting stations. So it's a scientific survey and interview 50 people as they exit the voting station. We don't ask any questions about political parties. We ask them about how long they stood in queues, how long it took them to get to the voting station, if they're disabled, whether they found access easy, and so on.
Yes.
But two questions are asked, and that is whether the elections were free. And by that, I think an average South African would feel that there was no coercion in terms of the election process. In other words, no one forced them to vote for whoever they voted for. And secondly, whether the elections were fair. And here we talk about objectivity, impartiality, and the fact that they feel that there was not any political interference in the process.
Fantastic. And I mean, speak to us about some of the percentages that you have broken down for us here in terms of the experience that they found inside the voting station. For instance, you're saying here 97% found the voting procedure inside the voting station easy to understand. At what point was the survey done? Because, I mean, as you've said, there have been some reports of people generally not being happy. It's either your name on the ID wasn't found, or you were turned away because the system didn't capture you properly, or where the system, broke down. People, especially the ones that are first-time voters, were turned away, we are told, in several provinces, albeit very small groupings. But it's very interesting that such a high number of people are generally satisfied.
Yes. When things go wrong, I think people do complain and should complain about what has gone wrong. When things go right, people generally don't say anything. But if you ask them for their opinions, they will say everything went well. So the loudest voices are generally those people who did not find the process to be free and fair. But they are in the minority. There are isolated cases, but by no means should that be ignored.
Talk to me about the sample, the way in which you conducted your survey, in terms of what your demographics were, and also just some of the tools that you've used to go into the survey.
Okay, so because we're now not under strict lockdown, we were very fortunate to be able to do this face-to-face, and we've been doing this for more than 2 decades. So we use PDAs now. Our field workers go to the voting stations, and then they ask people who are exiting the station if they wish to answer some questions, and then whoever is willing to do so, we conduct the interview with them. And it's 50 people at 300 stations, so just over 12,100 people were interviewed to conclusion. This is a very sound sample, and it's done representatively of provinces with a scientific method, as I've mentioned, and it's one of the most representative voting exit surveys in the world. So we're quite proud of that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Professor. We really do appreciate it. Professor Narnia Bohler-Muller there from the Human Sciences Research Council.